Hello everyone and welcome back to the journey of my YouTube channel. Today I'm continuing my series that's about sequels. So I guess you could say this is the sequel to my original video about sequels. So now I guess the question is this sequel video better than the original video? And I really hope that it is. I'm hoping that each one of these videos gets better, but you'll have to let me know in the comments if this sequel lives up to the original or if it's worse. The sequel book that I'm talking about today is Enna Burning by Shannon Hale, and it is the sequel to The Goose Girl, which, again, if you are on my email newsletter and have been for a while, you might remember from my top 10 list of 2021 that The Goose Girl made that list. If you're not on my email newsletter, I will put a link down below so that you can get on it and find out when I publish top 10 lists. And The Goose Girl is a retelling of the grim fairy tale The Goose Girl, but this sequel to it is a little bit interesting because it's not a retelling of any particular fairy tale. It's just a new original story. I struggled to get into this one at first because it took some time early on to recap what happened in book one, and that is a pet peeve of mine in sequels. Despite the fact that, as I talked about in my first video of this series, I have a weird tendency to like sequels. I do not enjoy sequels going back and spending a few paragraphs telling me what happened in book one because I read book one. I never ever read sequels without reading book one, so it bothers me a little bit. This book, it wasn't bad. It's just a pet peeve of mine if the author does much recap at all of book one. So it took me a few chapters to really get into this one, but then pretty quickly, within just maybe like 3 chapters or so, Enna Burning really distinguished itself as its own story, and I appreciated that a lot. And it makes sense for the tone to feel very different in this book because The Goose Girl is about a girl who learns to speak to the wind. So it has this airy, bright, flowy tone like you're walking outside on a spring day and it's just really pleasant and bright and happy. But Enna Burning is about a girl who learns to speak to fire. So appropriately, it's much more intense. It starts right out with some heated conflict. That pun is so painful I could barely get it out, but I also couldn't resist. There's a battle early on in this book, which is not the case with the Goose Girl. There's a major death early on, and it just quickly presents itself as darker than the Goose Girl and just very, very tonally different. It also got I See Fire from The Hobbit stuck in my head the entire time. I could not stop thinking about that song while I was reading this book. Like I said, it's a very intense book overall, but what's most intense about it really is Enna's internal conflict, which is also my favorite thing about the book. That was what made it so interesting to me, was that Enna, on the one hand, wants this ability to speak to fire. She wants the fire to be inside her because it's beautiful and powerful, it's energetic and is alive, and it makes her feel important. It makes her feel like she's free from the boredom of her life in the forest. But on the other hand, she sees early on how deadly and disastrous the fire can be. So she's terrified of losing control over it and hurting people, but she's also terrified of giving it up because that started to feel like it would be giving up her own self. Normally, I am also not a fan of love triangles, but I can be okay with them if they reflect the protagonist's inner conflict in an interesting way, and that is what happens in this book. And the other reason that I was okay with this kind of love triangle in this book was that Shannon Hale basically takes every love triangle trope that I don't like and says, I don't like this either. She essentially seemed to set it up specifically to show that the tropes that I don't like, she explains exactly why I don't like them just by writing this story. So I did appreciate that. I never was in any doubt about how it was going to go. I knew right away how the relationships were going to play out, but I still found them believable based on who the characters are. It made sense to me. So I think that's more important than being surprised anyway, was that the characters were acting consistently based on who they were. And I found them interesting the whole time because each one of them had a lot of conflict. They had a lot of layers. Each character was more than one thing. So that made me okay with the fact that it maybe wasn't the most surprising. It didn't feel like a plot twist. Maybe it was just a problem with my expectations, but in the last quarter of the story, the pacing did feel a little strange to me. I felt like the main climax came oddly early, and then there were a lot of sub climaxes after that, which doesn't necessarily have to be a problem, but it did strike me as feeling a little bit strange, and I would maybe have liked to see Enna be a little more active in that last part of the book, where she was maybe a little bit more stepped back at that part of the story, where I really wanted her to step up and take action and be at the forefront there. But I still really, really enjoyed what it was, and those are just odd, nitpicky little critiques that I have as a writer. If I were just a reader, I probably wouldn't have even noticed anything. So, is Enna Burning better than the Goose Girl? I don't personally think it is better. The Goose Girl just had this quality that felt grounded and solid and tightly put together. It just felt so strong and natural. And I think that's because it's based on a story that's hundreds of years old. It built on the foundation of this Grimm's fairy tale. And a burning sprang into being because we all love the Goose Girl and we wanted to spend more time in that world. But it doesn't have that hundreds of years old foundation, and it is very tonally different. But at the same time, I do think it's a very strong sequel. I didn't find it a disappointment after The Goose Girl by any means, and I especially appreciated that it definitively added something new to the series. It wasn't just trying to relive the Goose Girl. Shannon Hale decided to go with a very different character, a very different atmosphere, a very different kind of internal struggle, and I really appreciated that about this book, and I thought that made it much stronger than it would have been. It really gave it its own unique identity. I said at the beginning I absolutely never read sequels without the original, but you pretty much could read this as a standalone. I don't recommend it. I think you should read The Goose Girl first, but it's strong enough and independent enough that you could read just Enna Burning on its own. For this week's t-shirt of the week, I brought my Havoc t-shirt, my season 4 sensational Havoc t-shirt. Havoc.com, gohavoc.com, publishes flash fiction every weekday, and they were the first site to officially publish me. They published my story Higher Light on December 18th, 2020, I think. Sensational, the theme of that season of flash fiction stories was the five senses, and Higher Light I submitted for the sense of sight, and it got accepted, and so that was my first publication. So I think it makes sense why this t-shirt is a favorite of mine. It's also my only bright purple t-shirt, and I like that it has a phoenix on it. And I got to meet several other Havoc authors at Realm Makers too, so that was really fun, and that's another thing that makes this t-shirt special for me. I wore this t-shirt at Realm Makers because I knew that a bunch of Havoc authors and editors were going to be there, so it always reminds me of the writing community when I wear this one, and of the fact that I did get officially published already. So that was a very exciting time. It was a great experience to work with Havoc, and so I really like to remember that by wearing this very bright purple t-shirt. Okay, that's all for today. If you like this video, make sure to, like it by hitting the button, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see me compare more sequels to original books, and leave a comment. Tell me about your favorite sequels or your least favorite sequels, and let me know about sequels that are even better than the originals, and let me know what your t-shirt of the week is. And I will see you next time, and thank you for journeying with me. Bye!